welcome back to Book Break. Believe it or not, we are almost in the year 2022. I do not know what happened to the last year, but it has gone and we're nearly there. So looking forward into the year ahead of us, I wanted to let you know about 22 books that I think will be massive on BookTube in 2022. So mark your calendars, these are the books that you are going to be obsessed with. Diving straight into January with one of the biggest, most anticipated releases of the year, and that is obviously To Paradise by Hanya Yanagihara. So Hanya Yanagihara is the author of A Little Life, which has been a BookTube favourite, it's also been a TikTok favourite, it's been around for years, and excitement around this book is just growing with every year. So the fact that the author has a new book coming out in 2022 is big, exciting news. If you've read her previous book, The People in the Trees, you will know that this author has a huge range. Her books are not similar to each other really at all, other than the fact that the writing is gorgeous in both of them. And this third one is no exception. Once again, we are jumping to a totally different genre, a totally different concept. This one actually has 3 different timelines in the book. It's divided into 3 sections, 1893, 1993 and 2093, and it's 3 different versions of what America could look like, with themes running through the sections, even though they're very, very different from each other. So a really exciting book that I predict BookTube is going to be talking about for a long time. Another one coming out in January is Hare House by Sally Hinchcliffe. So this is a modern gothic novel. It's kind of modern day witch story. So this is about a woman who leaves her job at an all-girls boarding school. She leaves under mysterious circumstances and comes to live in a new home in the grounds of this remote estate in Scotland, in the snow. So it's a great setting, but something sinister is lurking there. So it's kind of dark and uncanny and mysterious rather than full horror. So many ingredients there for a BookTube favourite. Another January one is The Christie Affair by Nina de Gramont. That one has already had so much buzz on BookTube from the second that the proof started going out. I've read a proof, absolutely loved it. So this one is going to be out in January and I think the world's just going to explode for it. It's a really, really fun book, especially if you're a big fan of Agatha Christie. So this is a fictionalization of the 11 days when Agatha Christie went missing. That is a true story, and this book imagines what might have happened in that time. But extra twist, the book is narrated from the perspective of Agatha Christie's husband's mistress. So you kind of get 3 books in one. There's the story of Agatha Christie's disappearance, which is this really fun mystery. We also get to go back into the narrator's childhood and her life growing up, and there's a really sad and powerful historical fiction story in there. And then there is also an Agatha Christie-esque murder mystery plot weaved in there as well. It's so much fun. I really loved this book. Fiona and Jane by Jean Chen-Ho is a collection of short stories, but they're all linked. They're all about the same characters. And this is another theme that BookTube loves. This is all about female friendship through the years. So the stories are told in alternating voices and take us through 2 decades of this friendship between Fiona and Jane, who are 2 Taiwanese American women. And each of the stories really dive into the complexities of this friendship, looking at love and lust and sorrow and identity. And then one more for January, it's a really good month apparently, that is The Maid by Nita Prose. So this one is being adapted into a movie starring Florence Pugh, so obviously it is going to be huge. And this is another murder mystery that I think BookTube will just find really fun. This one is about a hotel maid who discovers a dead body at the hotel where she works and gets sucked in to a hunt for the truth. So very dark, very page-turning stuff. January always feels like it's 300 years long, so it's lucky that there are so many good books coming out to keep us all entertained throughout January. But finally, looking forward to February, there is a book coming out that I think BookTube is going to love, and that is Heartsick by Jessie Stevens. If you remember the book 3 Women by Lisa Taddeo, that was a non-fiction book that was really, really big on BookTube, so I think this is its natural successor. This is another non-fiction book that reads like fiction. It's very, very narrative non-fiction. So this is another one that dives into individual stories, but where 3 Women was about women's sex lives, this book is about heartbreak, this universal experience that we almost all go through at some point or another, or at several points throughout our lives, and can be completely debilitating as an experience, but it's also a form of grief that isn't given that much respect by the outside world when you're going through it. So I think this is a book that a lot of people will find relatable, moving, heartbreaking. We Are the Brennans by Tracy Lang is also coming out in the UK in February. So this one has already been huge in the US. It was a Book of the Month pick last summer. This is about a 29-year-old woman who causes a drunk driving accident. So she wakes up full of guilt and shame and ends up having to go home to her Irish Catholic family who she had left behind and has not seen for 5 years, and having to rebuild those relationships. In March, we are getting The Atlas 6 by Olivia Blake. So this one has already been absolutely massive. It was a TikTok sensation. The book was originally self-published and TikTok just went wild for it. It's about a secret society of magicians coming to study in the mysterious London headquarters where the stakes are suddenly going to be extremely high. So this one has got dark academia vibes galore, and now a fully revised and edited version is coming out in March, so you can catch up on that before the sequel comes out. In March we are also getting Our Wives Under the Sea by Julia Armfield. So her debut short story collection, Salt Slow, came out in 2019 and made a bit of a splash on BookTube back then, and this one I predict will do even more so. No pun intended, but it is about the sea. So this one is her first novel, and it's about a lesbian couple called Leah and Miri struggling in the aftermath of a deep sea diving mission that Leah went on for work, in which something mysteriously went wrong and she has never been the same since she came back. So the book is very strange and weird and sad and melancholy, and also very open to interpretations, which I think BookTube will have a lot of fun discussing. The Club by Ellery Lloyd is another one that I predict BookTube will have a lot of fun with. This one is going to be particularly good for fans of things like White Lotus and 9 Perfect Strangers. This one is set on an island that has been transformed into an ultra exclusive private members club with a massive celebrity guest list for the opening weekend. But as the first guests start to arrive, it becomes clear that if your name is on the list, you may not be getting out alive. April is going to give us the release of Young Mungo by Douglas Stewart. So Douglas Stewart's first novel, Shuggie Bain, has just been growing and growing in popularity on BookTube ever since its Booker win, and who can forget #Shuggate of 2021, in which 2 booktubers had a very funny, very public parody battle about whether or not Shuggie lived up to the hype, concluding in the end that it did. So with all of that build up, I predict that Young Mungo will burst straight onto BookTube's radar. So this one is a novel about first love between 2 men, James and Mungo, who are caught up in this hyper-masculine world, living between 2 Glasgow housing estates and expected to be enemies. And as you might expect from this author, it is a bit of a tearjerker. But look at this fantastic cover. It is still, for some reason, absurdly rare for queer books to be this overtly queer on the cover, so love to see this. There's also Sea of Tranquility by Emily St John Mandel, which I'm really excited about. Emily St John Mandel is the author of Station 11, which is a book that has been bursting back onto the scene recently, being a pandemic novel, even though one that was written years before our current pandemic. So it's been getting a lot of attention, it's now being adapted into a TV show, so it's just going to get even more hype. So I predict there will be a lot of buzz for Emily St John Mandel's next book, and it's a time travel novel. And another one coming out in April is Concerning My Daughter by Kim Hae-jin. So this is about a woman who is really shocked when her 30-something daughter gets a girlfriend and refuses to accept and welcome the girlfriend into her home. However, at the same time, the care home where she works, where the mother works, starts to insist that she lower her standard of care for an elderly dementia patient who had chosen to travel the world and pursue a career instead of having children. And the mother is really shocked and upset by this. Why should having chosen a different life for yourself mean that your life isn't worth anything? So these 2 things in her life start to contrast, and the book offers up this whole fresh look at the different forms of love and family. In May, we are getting The Dance Tree by Kieran Millward Hargrave. Anything by this author is obviously going to be huge on BookTube, so I had to include it. This one is set in 1518 when a strange plague strikes the women of Strasbourg, causing them to start dancing in the streets. So this is inspired by a bizarre but true story of a dancing plague in Strasbourg, where somewhere between 50 to 400 people started dancing for days in the street. The city authorities had to declare an emergency. So it's already such a great premise for a book, but if you also chuck in 3 really fascinating female main characters with a very strong bond and plenty of secrets, then you have all the ingredients for a BookTube favourite. We had to remove this post by Hannah Barefoot. Looks really interesting. So this is about a young woman who gets a job as a content moderator for a social media platform whose name she isn't allowed to mention. So her job involves looking at the absolute worst that the internet has to offer: hate speech, conspiracy theories, really offensive pictures and videos, and deciding what needs to be removed. So it's pretty tough work, but Kaylee, our main character, finds a good group of friends and even a girlfriend amongst her colleagues. But then they all start to break down. She finds her colleagues repeating and embodying some of the conspiracy theories that they are supposed to be removing from the internet, and she starts to worry if this work is just too much for all of them. So this is a book that sounds really relevant, especially to those of us on BookTube who live a lot of our life in the online world. Akwaeke Emezi is another really popular author on and off BookTube, and their next book, You Made a Fool of Death with Your Beauty, is going to be a romance novel, which is new for this author, and a romance novel inspired by Florence and the Machine. So this one is about a main character who has spent the last 5 years recovering from losing the love of her life in a tragic accident, and now feels ready to maybe open her heart to someone new again. Then we get to June, my birthday month, so the best month, and there is a book coming out called Dirt Town by HAYLEY SCRIVENOR, which is a crime novel set in rural Australia. And I feel like these have been so popular the last few years, so this will be no exception. In this book, a 12-year-old girl goes missing on her way home from school, and so the community is thrown into grief and confusion, and we follow the investigation, which uncovers a lot of the secrets that have been binding this community together. I feel like I just said so many BookTube buzzwords in that description. In July, are you ready for this? Because this is a big one. We are getting a sequel to The Miniaturist by Jessie Burton. 8 years after that book first came out, we'll see the release of The House of Fortune. I know so many of you are already so excited for this one. So The House of Fortune picks up 20 years after the events of The Miniaturist and follows Thea, who is the niece of Nella, the main character from the first book. So now is the time to reread The Miniaturist, or read it for the first time if you haven't already. Next, an exciting one for the thriller fans. Alice Feeney, who is the author of Sometimes I Lie, has a new thriller coming out in August called Daisy Darker. This one is set in a crumbling house on a tiny private Cornish island where the Darker family are coming together for the first time in years. When the tide comes in, they will be cut off from the outside world for 8 hours, and when the tide goes out, nothing will ever be the same again. So think And Then There Were None with a dysfunctional family thrown in. Now, looking all the way ahead to November, I don't have too much information on this one yet, but Hafsa Faizal has a new series coming out, starting with A Tempest of Tea. Hafsa Faizal is the author of the We Hunt the Flame books, which you would have seen all over TikTok. They've been absolutely massive, and this new duology is going to be King Arthur meets Peaky Blinders with vampires. And then 2 more backlist titles that I think will get a bit of a resurgence on BookTube in 2022. The first one is One True Loves by Taylor Jenkins Reid, as that is getting a movie adaptation this year, but I don't know the date yet. One True Loves is a romance novel about a woman who loses the first love of her life, her first husband, in a terrible accident, but it's only once she has moved on and met someone new that she discovers her husband didn't die. After all, he has been alive all this time, coming back to find her. So now she is torn between her 2 one true loves. And another movie adaptation coming out in 2022 is Luckiest Girl Alive. So that's going to be a Netflix movie based on the book by Jessica Knoll, which was such a good book. So that one, again, I think is going to get such a big boost on BookTube this year. I don't even know where to start describing this BookTube because it's got so much going on in it, and a lot of it is spoilers and plot twists. So let's just say it is about a woman whose past is not what it seems. So those are 22 books that I think are just going to be massive in 2022. I would love to hear your comments of any other books that you're particularly excited about, and I will link here to last year's version of this video, 21 books that we think are going to be big on BookTube in 2021, so you can go back and see how many of them I was right about. See you next time.